Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the Senate chamber this morning. We're here today to hear the nomination for the Cannabis Commission, Jose B. Palacios this morning, Monday, April 17, 2023, and it's exactly 10:40 in the morning. Before we proceed with the agenda this morning, I'd like to call this meeting to order now. And if I may ask the LA to please call the roll for the committee membership.
Representative Blas Jonathan B.J. Atto.
Present.
Representative Diego V.F. Camacho.
Present.
Representative Vicente C. Camacho.
Present.
Senator Edith E. De Leon Guerrero.
Here.
Representative Marissa R. Flores.
Present.
Senator Karina L. Magofnia.
Gaiga.
Representative Danita K. Yangtame.
Yangi.
Madam Chair, all members of the SNIO GGO committee are present.
Thank you, Mr. Devin Macaranas, for that. According to our SNIO Rule 4, attendance and quorum only requires 3 members to be present to conduct the hearing. And since all members are here this morning, we have a quorum well established to conduct the business this morning. Thank you. May I hear a motion for the adoption of the agenda this morning? Any second? All those in favor say aye. Nays? This morning's agenda is hereby adopted. We're down now to item 4 of this morning's hearing, and we are open for public comments. Anybody from the public, you may proceed and state your comments for the nominee this morning. And if you have a written comment, please submit it also to the Sergeant at Arms so that we could have it on record. Anybody? No one? No public comment. Okay, we are officially closing the public comment right now. Moving on to item number 5. If I may invite the nominee and also the special assistant from the administration, Mr. Oscar A. Babauta, to introduce the nominee.
I'm ready, Madam Chair.
You may proceed.
Buenos dias, Madam Chair and Senate President, Chairperson of the SNIO, Judiciary and Governmental Operations Committee. Good morning and have a day, Tiro, to you, Madam Chair, and your esteemed members of this SNIO committee, and of course, the hardworking members of the LB staff. For the record, my name is Oscar M. Babauta. I am here on behalf of the Office of the Governor, Governor Arnold I. Palacios, and that of Lieutenant Governor David M. Apateng. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm here, Madam Chair and members, to introduce officially to you as the Governor's nominee for the Sinamay Cannabis Commission board member. Mr. Jose Palacios is currently seated to my right. Mr. Palacios is a professional individual with over 45 years of experience in both the public and private sector, dating back to 1978. He served in the United States Army as a satellite communications equipment repair specialist in Fort Hood, Texas. Was a senior advisor to the CEO of Inventory Control Center in Torrance, California, and is the co-founder, operations manager of the Palacios Security Agency, PSA, in Guam. He was also a part of the Guam Police Department 28 Police Academy cycle and was assigned to the U.S. Attorney General's Office of Organized Crime for Drug Enforcement Task Force in conjunction with the DEA, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and as well as the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Office, ATF. Part member of the U.S. Secret Services and a U.S. Immigration Naturalization Services himself. During his tenure, he was awarded the GPD Meritorious Service Medal, the GPD Unit Citation for Excellence, and was a four-time finalist for the Police Officer of the Week of the Year, and was given an award by the Guam Legislature Committee for Public Safety for valor, courage, and honor. He then worked for J.B. Palacios and Associates and was the risk exposer to liability consultant of Pacific Indemnity Insurance Company. In addition, he was the deputy director of the Department of Corrections in Guam and was the special assistant to former Lieutenant Governor, the Honorable Michael W. Cruz, before becoming the director of the Department of Corrections in Guam during the Camacho Cruz administration. Governor Palacios and Lieutenant Governor Apatang places their full trust and confidence in Mr. Palacios' ability to serve in the Sinamay Cannabis Commission. I know he now stands ready to answer any inquiry that any of you, Madam Chair, and that of the members questions this morning and present his plans for the future of the Cannabis Commission. At heart, I've spoken to him a few times, and he has quite a convincing plan for the Cannabis Commission to flourish and expand in the Commonwealth. His long history of professional experience, credentials, and commitment to serving the Commonwealth in this capacity makes him a viable candidate. The administration kindly asks for your expeditious review, approval, and of course, present it to the full SNIO membership on your next SNIO session for the blessing and approval of Mr. Palacios' candidacy to the Cannabis Commission. Once again, I thank you, Madam Chair, Jesus Masi, and Giliso, to all of you for the opportunity to introduce him this morning, and more especially to this August body. Thank you again. I will see you this afternoon at 1 p.m. Jesus Masi. He is at your disposal now, Madam Chair and members. Till then, I'll see you in the 1 o'clock.
Jesus Masi, Mr. Babauta,
Adios.
for your very open introduction and great details of, I'm sorry, Mr. Palacios. My apologies. Now, before we proceed with the nominee this morning, for those viewing public, we are live on channel 23 and also on the Legislative YouTube channel, and we will also be sharing the hearing this morning on our Facebook page. And assisting us this morning is our Senate Counsel, Antoinette Villagomez, our Senate LA, Mr. Devin Macaranes, our Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Benter Lahi, and Mr. Will Uggan, and also our IT Manager, Mr. Jonathan Diaz. Thank you for your assistance. Before we proceed with the nominee's opening statement this morning, it's a standard procedure of this committee to administer the oath before any questioning. So, Mr. Devin, will you please administer the oath this morning? Thank you.
Mr. Jose B. Palacios, you do solemnly swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you shall give in the matter at hand shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, Mr. Palacios, you may deliver your opening statement for like 5 minutes before the committee. You may proceed. Thank you.
Buenas and half a day. Tirawan, good morning. Manunod at please na members. Imena 23 na legislatura para isang katan na Islas Marianas. Si Jesus Maasi, Gilisao, and thank you para esta na oportunidad ipabigay gipago gini na organs and hamzo. Para oloki para gobyerno, segundo gobyerno, ifamilyak ko, imangasongo, especialmente para tautauta. Wow, si J.B. Palacios. I am a son of Saipan. I was born at Dr. Torres Hospital in Asterlahi and spent my early childhood in Saranca, District 1. And though I may be away for a long time, I never forgot where I came from. My heritage, my culture, my language, my values, my identity, my roots. In my many conversations with the governor, my thought process was always, do I go home or do I come home? I choose to come home. I pray for your most favorable consideration to be a commissioner on the cannabis board. I will earn your confidence. I will earn your trust. By working closely with you, seeking your thoughts, your input, your advice, your guidance, and most especially your wisdom, individually and collectively, as lawmakers and invested stakeholders. The Tulumar Sensible CNMI Cannabis Act of 2018, now Public Law 20-66, established the CNMI cannabis industry, with the first business license being issued for commercial production and retail sales shortly thereafter. Still in its infancy, the industry shows a very promising and valuable contributor to the CNMI tax base and economic activity, generating $2,063,736 in gross revenue, employing 32 of our own people, resulting in $759,928 in salaries, and over $1 million additional dollars into the government coffers in the form of CUC payments for water, power, rental payments, and other business-related expenses. This, according to a Cannabis Commission news report dated March 26, 2022, that was presented to the Committee on Cannabis for the 22nd CNMI legislature. The industry has since grown, now employing about 45 of our own people, while it's increasing its contribution to the economic activity and tax base of the CNMI. With your advice and guidance upon review of existing policies and/or regulations, with direct input from invested stakeholders, I look forward at the opportunities to amend and/or repeal existing policies and/or regulations that stymies the growth and expansion of this economically proven viable industry caused by overregulation and overtaxation, by promoting policies and/or regulations that will incentivize these invested stakeholders to achieve sustained managed growth and expansion. I have the experience, I have the background, I have the understanding, and I have the vision. In closing, I'd like to apologize to Madam Senate President. I was advised not to wear my purple tie-dyed psychedelic T-shirt and green bell-bottom pants for this hearing. With that, si Zeus Masi Talo.
Sidos Masi, and I'm happy that you didn't show up with your lowrider car too, and your hydraulics. Really appreciate that. A little bit of humor here, but thank you very much for your opening statement. I think it warms up the day as we start the inquiries on the questions from the members. So at this time, we're going to move down to our agenda item number 6 under discussion, and this is the time where we open up the floor for questions with the nominee from the members. So members, anybody? I recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome everybody. Mr. Palacios, actually very simple question here, and you had mentioned it in your statement, but Mr. Palacios, how viable is the cannabis industry, and what do you propose needs to be relooked and perhaps tweaked in the regulations, the policies and processes in order to ensure a viable industry?
The industry rather has already proven itself to be very viable. We're talking about an industry that has not received any type of government subsidy, but yet employs our own people our own people. These are our own people that are allowed to earn wages to contribute back into the economy. There are a lot of things that need to be tweaked. A lot of the laws in 20-66, or rather the language, are very ambiguous at best. As an example, there's one here that says on page 23, to regulate and prohibit any advertising. To regulate and prohibit any advertising by manufacturers, processors, wholesalers, or retailers of marijuana items by the medium of newspapers, letters, billboards, radios, and otherwise. In other words, we're saying, let's introduce this bill, make it a public law, create a industry, but don't tell anybody about it. I mean, again, that's just one very glaring example of that. We're talking about a market or an industry that's, literally a captive industry, because the commodity is not exportable. It's a captive industry that's generating honest living for our own people through gainful employment, contributing to the tax base, again, without any government subsidies.
Thank you. I yield for now.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I recognize Representative Marissa Flores.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Good, ma'am. Thank you.
So I have some questions, but I think the first pressing question that arises is tourism. And when you think about tourism, you think about everything that we have to offer as a Commonwealth. In terms of rebranding what that looks like, in my mind, I'm thinking cannabis tourism, right? Because the business is quite lucrative. There's certain places in Asia Pacific that prohibit such a use of this herb, right? So what are your ideas as far as, number one, being a commission, right, and regulatory agent to kind of assist in the dialogue with the entities and the investors coming in, because eventually you're going to have to create these types of relationships with the investors. You're the first person that they would probably come and see, right, and have this dialogue with your staff. So how do you propose, since it's being lucrative, but we are so saturated already with several licenses, how do you propose this would be more lucrative in terms of cannabis tourism, and how you would want to see that for the future?
In regards to targeted markets, in particular, the two major tourism market, which is Korea and Japan, they do have internal laws that even if you were to smoke or consume cannabis here in the CNMI, if you were to put that on social media or anything like that, you could be arrested upon return and prosecuted in Japan for smoking or consuming cannabis in the CNMI. Now, that's really nothing we can do on that end. But what we can do on this end is, because of the stigma, and that's really what it is, because of the stigma of cannabis. If you recall, for those that are about my age anyway, alcohol before, when somebody consumes alcohol, they're immediately branded bulachero. When you smoke marijuana, you're immediately branded a druggie. But there is acceptance of marijuana properties medically that are beneficial, especially to a lot of our population now that have joined the military at least going back to 1990 at the start of Desert Storm. And a lot of them come back and they suffer everything from physical ailments to psychological challenges. The VA actually recognizes cannabis and its products for the treatment of some of those ailments. So there is that, but in regards to the tourism, the way that we can expand that is because of the fact that there's that stigmatization where they don't want to be seen walking into a particular dispensary. But recently, my sister Tina actually shared it with me, and it was a video on a pilot project that's being done in El Paso County, Colorado. And what they do is they allow these retailers to do home deliveries. So that takes away that stigma. Now, if we were to put that in relation to tourism, we have a lot of consumers from both tourist market, but a lot of the cannabis that they acquire are those that are not subjected to any type of quality control because it's acquired through the black market. So because they're not subjected to any type of quality control, they're buying it from walking down the beach and somebody offering it to them and whatnot. But if we can have it where they're aware that they can place a phone order and it can be brought to their hotel room, granted that they meet all of the access requirement, the age requirements, and so forth, then we're expanding into that area of making it more available to these consumers. As far as the education part, that is really what is lacking. And again, I brought up the fact of homegrown versus that is processed with some quality control applied to it. With the advances in agriculture and everything else, you cannot guarantee that what's being put in that homegrown product doesn't contain any carcinogenic compounds or cancer-causing compounds in its fertilizers, in its soil, in its growth enhancement, whatever it is that they put in. Because they're not subjected to any type of quality control. But a lot of people don't know that. And when I say educating, there are some parameters, and again, going back into my background with law enforcement, is that there are some parameters that has to stay in place. That being said, that parameter is not negotiable because we're talking about public safety. Doesn't matter how good the industry is. Public safety cannot be negotiated just for the fact of having an industry. So there are some aspects and regulations that have to be enforced. But the enforcement part, really, when we talk about cannabis enforcement, as far as enforcement from the commission itself, we're talking about sending out enforcement officers to go into these legitimate businesses that are paying into the tax base, that are employing our people to make sure that they're following the regulations. It's not enforcement to go and check somebody's backyard, because that's not going to happen. You're on that slippery slope, because now you're talking, when you start talking about personal growth and regulation and having a cannabis enforcement officer go there, you're on a slippery slope when it comes to the Fourth Amendment under search and seizure and the Fifth Amendment under self-incrimination. That's a job for DPS. But at the same time, because of that lack of educating in general, the common accepted perception is, oh, it's legal, so it's okay, we don't have to do anything about it. But yet the regulation says that in order for you to grow personal marijuana at your property, you have to register and get a permit. That, to my knowledge, not even one person has registered. To my knowledge, I might be wrong, but I'm just saying, to my knowledge, not one person has done that. Speaking to the director of DPS a couple of days ago, and I believe he had mentioned that the citations, I guess, that they're going to be issuing out for violation is either in final print or just getting printed. We're talking about 2 years in already, where there's active sales and there's active open public consumption of cannabis, and we're still in the process of finalizing a citation. So I cannot blame the previous commission members or previous commission employees. I'm here now, and with your vote, it's on me. And there's a way to fix it, and that way to fix it is working with this honorable body collectively, entrusted by the public to look out for their well-being and for their safety, and at the same time be able to provide through legislation. And I'm going to reach out to every one of you. I'm going to reach out, and I have reached out to stakeholders. These are the people that have invested their life savings into an industry that has proven itself to be very viable, only lacking, I guess, a clear direction. And that clear direction can only be established through guidance and wisdom from this honorable body, with direct input from stakeholders.
Do you still have more questions? Go ahead, please.
Thank you for that, Mr. Palacios. So on the flip side, you have your consumers, right? Outside tourism, which is the local market. And there was some data provided in the Centric report, but I think this one actually is a little bit more. I'd like to kind of get an idea of how your personal input. And there has been a lot of support with the local community, and how the herb and the medicinal argument is being supported by a lot of individuals in our community. Where do you stand with marijuana use, or I'm sorry, restricting or taking out marijuana as a form of the possibility of not being gainfully employed, should you have doctors prescribe prescription, and if they're working for the government, or let's say 100% locally funded, where do you stand on that if you were going to promulgate and work with this committee to kind of develop legislation for those individuals who actually need to smoke, but also need a job? How do you propose, and what is your, not propose, but what is your stance on that, your personal opinion on use of marijuana, prescribed marijuana, purchased legally and gainfully being employed for sustainability?
When I went and got my drug test, Romeo, I believe was his name, handed me the drug-free workplace policy for the CNMI. So I was asking him, was that from Mr. Richard Pierce? And he said, yes. I go, oh, I worked with Richard on that back in '96. So I am familiar with the drug-free workplace policy that exists. The policy that exists currently, it's there. And it's only those positions really that prohibits employment that fall under the category of what's called a testing designated position or TDP, police officers, bus drivers, firemen, people that work in the engine room at CUC. And the reason for that is because of they're dealing with the immediate and direct safety of the public, their actions, consequences, and so forth. But as far as the general population, again, the provision is that on the law is that if they have a doctor's acknowledgement of prescription and so forth, then it's really just a policy matter within internally, probably with, say, OPM, to change it and accept and recognize and maybe include that, tweak the existing drug-free workplace policy, tweak it to include it, that if you are if you do have a verified medical authorization, I guess you might want to call it, semantics, but if you do have that, that should not be then a cause of prohibition. But again, that's just because I guess what I'm getting at, ma'am, is that because there's already a government-wide policy, which is the drug-free workplace for the CNMI, is just an adoption of that, because there is no exception to that. Because when that policy came out, again, like I said, the big push for drug-free workplace happened nationwide starting in, I believe, 89 or 90, around that time, early on with the Just Say No campaign with former First Lady Nancy Reagan. So when that policy was put in place, it was years before the acceptance of cannabis, even at the local level. It was the acceptance of cannabis for medical purposes, no longer being a lab rat, if you will. So it's my advice or my opinion, my apologies, is adapt that standard or that exemption into the current drug-free workplace policy with OPM, and that probably can be shot through the AAA process without having to go through changing legislation. So
Thank you, sir, for that. I yield, Madam President.
Thank you, Representative Flores. Any other member? Recognize Senator Corina Magofia.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome, everyone. Good morning. Congratulations, Mr. Palacios, on your nomination. My question is, since the time you received the notice for the nomination, what actions have you taken to gain insight about the industry itself, the potential challenges that the commission has been experiencing? And I know that your appointment is only up until September of this year, but what plans do you have in place or what objectives do you have that you would like to achieve in this very, very short period of time?
thank you, ma'am. Well, the first thing is, when I first got the notification, if you will, I got me a copy of Public Law 20-66, and read it like 2 times, going on the 3rd time, and start marking some of those that are ambiguous. I mean, clearly ambiguous. That there's no way you can. There's just no way that this can be here. Again, I go back to regulate and prohibit any advertising. If you're saying you have an industry, then you cannot have that. It's just that simple. There's no 2 ways around that. You can regulate the form or the time of day, similar to how they started out with tobacco. When tobacco first went to that kind of scrutiny because of its exposure to children watching television, Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man were glamorizing it. So to keep it away from having minors or children buy into it, they started off with only advertising like after 10 o'clock at night, when typically the kids are supposed to go to sleep. So somewhere along that line, maybe that can be a way that it can be done. But to just outright say, no, you can't, then I really don't see any recourse on it. Because what that really does is these are exactly the kind of ambiguities in the law that fuels the black market. This is the fuel that the black market thrives on, because they don't, if nobody knows where the legal dispensaries are and what their products are, then it's easier for me to just go to, sue from Cacman. I mean, it's just an example. It's not, I don't know who Sue from Cacman is, but, and get it from there. And again, that's the black market. That's fueling the black market. That's money that's not being taxed. So reading that, getting the Centric report, the history of the Cannabis Commission here in the CNMI, as well as outside comparisons. California is actually the standard. When you want to have a comparison, you use the California standard. California has a $8.6 billion a year legal cannabis industry. Conversely, because of overregulation and overtaxation, the black market generates $8.2 billion, $400 million difference. When I say overregulation and stymieing growth, it's almost cost prohibitive for an established business to open up a retail shop in, again, Cacman. But the way to go to do that and incentivize them would be along the line of rewriting again the policy or the law and saying, okay, the current licenses and fees amounts to $12,500 annually. That's a number that I got from one of the established businesses. But to open one in Cacman at that same price, or even in Rhoda at that same price, is again cost prohibitive, because we're talking again about literally a captive market. But if we can change that and say, okay, your first license that you have will serve almost like your corporate license, if you will. You pay that same amount at $12,500 a year. But any other expansion, be it opening up a shop in Rhoda, opening up a shop in Cacman, all you would need would be to get a business license and pay a hypothetical fee of $500 to open up shop. Now, the conventional thinking might be that, or pushback might be that, well, we're losing $12,000 in fees and whatnot. You're not losing $12,000 in fees. You're investing $12,000 in fees, because now by opening up that retail shop in Cacman, now they get to hire an additional employee. They get to rent and pay an additional rental. That landlord now gets to pay additional BGRT. That same retailer that opened up that shop now gets to pay additional CUC water and power. So there is a way to incentivize them, but not in the current structure in which they are overtaxed to the point where it's cost prohibitive. It's not. It's different from again, because of our geographical location, and the commodity is non-exportable. It's the market is what we have, our own people. Now, there was a study that came out that the World Health Organization did that says 1 in 4 a person in the CNMI as a whole consumes marijuana or cannabis product at least once a year. That comes down to 22.5% of the population. Based on the latest census for 2020, under the age of 21, we're talking about a market captive around the 11,000, just south of 12,000 people. Based on that, using what a different matrix, it's safe to calculate and say that, well, out of that 12,000 that are identified as having consumed cannabis in at least once a year, that about 7,000 have made a cannabis purchase legally at least once a year. Then out of that 7,000, you have at least 1,100 that have made cannabis purchases at least once a week. So there is, again, there is a lot of work that needs to go into rewriting the policy. And now we can work with the invested stakeholders and ask them, how do we grow this industry? There's an overabundance of licenses. One of the ways that, again, just a thought would be limit the license. Because when you limit the license, what happens is that face value of that license now goes up. Because it goes up, if there is one available, it goes out to public bid to the highest bidder. That's just to get that license. Hawaii has something similar in its alcohol license, where they limit the number of alcohol licenses. And the only way you can get one is when one has been revoked for whatever the regulation or the violation may be. It then goes out to public auction. That public auction now generates money as to who is the highest bidder for this. Once they get that awarded, they still have to pay the fees, the taxes, and everything else that follows with it. But it gives it face value. New York, one of the more famous ones, I guess, reference to that would be Michael Cohen with former President Trump. What they got him on some of the investigation with the Southern District of New York attorney was that his taxi medallions, because taxis in New York, I mean, they're more expensive than property, because nobody in New York owns a car or drives, at least New York City. So the medallions now are worth tens of millions of dollars. If somebody wants to open up a taxi company, you need to have a medallion. That in itself, again, the face value, by limiting the number of licenses, you can increase the face value of each license. At the same time, you control overproduction, because the easiest way to kill an industry is oversupply. Because when you have oversupply, you have no demand. And when you have no demand, businesses close. Conversely, at the same time, you don't want to get into a scenario whereby the limitation makes it almost creating a monopoly, because you don't want to do that neither. So there has to be a striking balance between the number of license production compatible to what the market can sustain. Once that sustained market reached its peak, then it's an industry that is going to be here, where 10 years from now, the budget for the CNMI can be based on, okay, the cannabis industry, automatic 7 million a year. Again, hypothetical. But it's something that you can rely on already as a form of tax base that's here. I guess on a caution note, though, because it's still federally not legal. Okay, and of course, federal laws are are superior based on the supremacy clause over any local law. There's nothing stopping the DEA from going into one of these dispensaries right now and shutting it down. Nothing at all, and they can do it. But because again, there's just that acceptance that this is something, a commodity, a product that as long as overregulation and prohibitions are in place, then all you're doing is fueling that black market, and that black market is only governed by one thing, and that's the criminal code.
Thank you for your expanded comment, Mr. Palacios. In the interest of time,
My apologies, ma'am.
not a problem. Any other comments any questions from the members? Recognize Representative Diego Camacho, please.
Good morning, Mr. Palacios, and to your family as well. Thank you for accepting the nomination. Let's start by I'm glad you brought up the homegrown cannabis registry. It really is unrealistic to regulate it, right? So maybe more public education in terms of, because I know the fees are reasonable. Just not so many people know what the rates are, and if they did, I think we would have more applicants for home registry. And then, what is your take on establishing a cannabis tracking system?
Right now, with again advancement in technology, there are programs that can do real-time points of sales recording. In other words, if you were to buy one from Sue's shop in, again, Cacman, once that transaction is inputted, automatically it's networked to, be it Rev and Tax, be it Department of Commerce, or be it the Cannabis Commission itself. So you're tracking sales in real time, you're tracking revenue in real time, and at the same time, because you're tracking these information in real time, you can also look out for red flags on overselling, because there is regulations as to amounts that can be sold to individuals per transactions.
Right. Yes, I think that would definitely work here. More to prevent any products going out to the black market. And I do just want to mention that with your appointment, if and when you're confirmed by the SNIL body, I think your appointment would establish finally a quorum. And there's a few applicants who've been waiting, and they've met the requirements on their end. So it's my hope that you would prioritize taking action on these applicants. I think there's a few, maybe 4 or 5, just waiting for action, and we could all use the additional funding with that. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I now recognize Representative BJ Atto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Palacios, and
Sir.
thank you for accepting the nomination of Governor Palacios and Lieutenant Governor Aptang. I don't really have a question for you, but I believe that from your statements already this morning, I think it's very important that you, along with the other members of the Cannabis Commission, we approve your nomination, should start sitting down and looking at the enabling statute, so we can start addressing that. Obviously, when the cannabis industry was first proposed here in the CNMI, we kind of have to etch it in stone in a way, kind of like when we first became a Commonwealth. We etched everything in stone and slowly started removing them from the legislative process and allowing departments and agencies to be self-regulated, so they can change with time. And I think it's important from a lot of the statements that we do need to change it with the time. This is a moving industry, and yes, the federal government can always come in and shut it down. But I personally believe that they would never do that just because of certain cases and decisions that have been made. I.e., example of Roe versus Wade. Once they start messing with certain things, they're going to have to go back and retrack a lot of the former decisions that were made way before any of us were even born. So I think it's important that we revisit the enabling legislation through the cannabis industry to the legislature, so we can give some more flexibility to the regulators of this industry, so that we can make it successful. But we also got to be mindful that a lot of these monies that will be collected for this industry cannot be commingled with our general appropriations, because our general appropriation also receive federal funds, and we know for a fact that we cannot commingle this industry with federal funds. So we got to be creative with that. We can kind of create a separate industry, kind of like what we used to have with the garment industry, a separate budget, so we can always have a supplemental budget within the fiscal year, or anytime within the fiscal year, multiple times, and we'll create an industry for ourselves. Guam has it, i.e., the military industry, right? The government of Guam can be failing, but the military economy is thriving. So therefore, Guam's economy will never fail because of external funds that are being brought in. And from the marketing standpoint, we have to market it properly, so that when visitors come to the cinema, they will see it firsthand and they know where to go from there. One of the bigger challenges that we will be facing is, should a lot of these visitors that will want to participate or partake with the cannabis, are the hotels itself, because most of the hotels in the cinema are smoke-free hotels. We're going to have to work with the hotels to allow maybe some sort of a smokehouse in the hotels. Maybe that's through the legislation, or maybe through the regulations of the cannabis industry itself. So with that being said, Madam Chair, I do not have any questions, but I know that all I ask is a recommendation from Mr. Palacios that they sit down, look at the enabling legislation, so that they can present to this body how we can strengthen the ability of the cannabis industry to be able to grow itself and thrive in this Commonwealth. And thank you again for accepting the nomination, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you, Representative BJ Atto. I now recognize Representative Denita Yangtamay.
I do have a question. Oh, thank you, Madam President. Good morning. I do have a
good-
question,
Yes, ma'am.
but I don't want to ask it because you may hate me. So
Look, please do,
I'll
ma'am.
just make a comment.
Please ask.
No. So, yes, you obviously are very knowledgeable in this field. So, well, I used to be the committee chair for cannabis last term, and all the things that you brought up were the things that I also went through, and they're very true. So yes, I would like to mirror Rep. BJ by asking you that, if you are, what do you call that, elected into this or accepted, then you should work together and fix whatever needs to be fixed. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield.
If
Thank
I-
you, Representative Yangtamay. I now recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Madam President. Just real quick, I just want to make sure that you ensure that there is senior citizen discounts. We need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I now recognize Senator Magofnia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that in the interest of time, I'll just make this very quickly. But in line with what Rep. Atto has mentioned, with the general fund being commingled, right, both in local revenues and federal funds, I know that last year, the former executive director had approached the legislature and attempted to request for a revolving account specifically for operations, simply because of the things that Rep. Atto had mentioned. And I wanted to know, what is your stance with regards to that request? Would you support it, or not support it, and why? What would be the advantages and disadvantages for a revolving account?
As far as the revolving account or an account to pay for the operations of the commission, that can also work through a lockbox account, and the lockbox account would basically dedicate a specific amount, just hypothetical, to DPS, to pay for the narcotics division of DPS, because now that DPS is not going to be funded minus the budget for their narcotics division because it's being funded through this lockbox, that unused or unappropriated amount from the general fund can then be transferred into so there's really a way to do it, but again, it just comes down to how it's going to be executed, so that it doesn't, again, the reason why I emphasize on that DEA can shut it down is because of it's basically we still have to deal with the federal laws. There's enough federal laws. The fact that the federal law says that's already in itself a regulation that's going to kill the industry when it wants to. I think it's incumbent upon us knowing, and again, this is where I will rely on your wisdom. We have 40 of our own people gainfully employed by an industry that's not receiving and has not been a recipient of any general fund subsidy. And again, like I said, that to me, that in itself addresses part of the social problems from unemployment of our own people and everything else that comes with it. So that would be, to me, that would be my pinnacle, to make sure that the gainful employment of our people is something that is going to come out of this, not necessarily the extra income coming into the coffers in the form of immediate fees and licenses and regulation, but the fact that there is that economic activity taking place, contribution through salaries and through rentals and whatnot and other dominoes, that really would be the pinnacle to reach. And if I may answer, ma'am, my apologies. If I may answer, Madam President, Congresswoman Yamangtai's question. I know she didn't ask it, but if I may answer her question, I'll share a story, and it's a quick one. My first search warrant, when I was learning how to write my affidavit, the chief prosecutor, Ray Johnson at the time, kept asking me, well, how do you know that it's a marijuana plant? And I'm like, well, I saw pictures. Well, how do you know it's a marijuana plant? Finally, I go, because I used to grow one. And he goes, put it down. So I put it down. How do I know that's a marijuana plant? Because I used to grow one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Palacios. Recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you, Senate President. Just in interest of time, and I'm going to make sure that I stay within Madam President's time because I know how she is very critical of time. So I am not going to go past 10:40. But I think I just want to join the rest of my colleagues in this body that, we give thanks that you accepted the nomination. I think my last thing to say, echoing again, we can never speak after Congressman Actau. He just seems to just put every nail on the coffin, and everybody wants to now jump in on what his sentiments are because it's true. And we feel that, and we can connect on that. My only thing, Mr. Palacios, is that upon the approval, and should this body approve your nomination and confirm you, I ask that you also be very cognizant and be transparent with the public, but build those relationships with the investors, because it's important. Maintaining their investment and growing that is also a part of the commission, and how you guys now tailor the regulatory components, right? So it can grow and we can see this come to fruition. So I ask that of you, be as transparent as possible, build those relationships with the investors, and I wish you luck. Thank you so much. Thank you, Congressman Atto, for pointing all of those wonderful things. We appreciate it. Thank you, Madam President. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Flores. May we pull up the PowerPoint quickly, please, before we call for a short recess? And I'll be submitting my last comments for this morning's nominee. So, Mr. Palacios, basically, what you're looking at is you talk about the benchmark of California being the market to look at and generating billions of dollars. And in our prior hearings of other nominees, I brought the same report up. And basically what I'm asking from your office, if you are considered and confirmed by SNIO delegation, is to have a much more robust reporting from the office rather than the centric report is good, but I think we could do more, much better with respect to the industry itself. And this will be not my questions, but I would ask you before we finalize our standing committee report to submit your additional statement or report to this committee with respect to your testimony this morning regarding, you talked about it's a captive industry and it's not exportable. I would like to hear your recommendation of how we can make it exportable. The CNMI is always sending out the narrative of no money, no money, no money. We're out of money. And this is the reason why we create industries to generate revenue for the Commonwealth. I do appreciate the revenue collections for rental spaces, for sales receipts and things like that. But the truth of the matter is the CNMI is looking in developing viable industries so that we could generate that extra revenue to support our services to the community and all the subsequent expenses of the CNMI government. Additionally, if you have the time to look at the centric report, and if you notice that the expenses for personnel comes down on 2022 at 49,368, whereas all other expenses table, it comes down to $257,316. And the biggest expense there is boards and compensation of $238,634. And on that particular report, the appropriation that was given to the cannabis is $555,439. If you do the mathematics on that, averaging out on the board and compensation, about $47,726 per person, which is pursuant to the law of 5 commissioners. I would like to have you write to this committee. What is your opinion of maintaining that particular compensation for the board? I noticed too on my calculation on personnel expenses, some concerns of 401k DC retirement for the employee, 2.8%. I would think that is the employer contribution, whereas if the employee is paying 10% of their payroll every 2 weeks, the employer matches 4%. That particular report only comes out at 2.8%. And Medicare and FICA stands correct on the allocation of 6.2 and 1.5%. Board and compensation, if you notice, 89% of the total allocation for the year. If you were to look at 267,791 mentioned on the centric report, if you were to measure it against 555,439, that comes out to about 50% of expenses to pay the boards and on their compensation. And I recognize that perhaps the board is not considered an employee of the Cannabis Commission, obviously because the data shows it. They're not paying their taxes out of the payroll report on the cannabis centric report. So I would expect and think and assume, which I don't think I'm wrong, that the commissioners are paying their own taxes. And I would think that each commissioner would be holding a business license to be considered part of the commission of this particular body. That would be my comments, and I shall be waiting for your additional information to be incorporated into the Standing Committee report before we submit our official report to the SNIO delegation for recommendation of your confirmation. Thank you so much, Mr. Palacios, and we shall take a recognize Senator Magofnia.
I'm so sorry. I just need to ask one more very important questions that maybe there's a lot of, especially parents, are concerned of. And hypothetically, if somebody was smoking outside in their yard with a group of friends, like my next door neighbor, for instance, and we have kids in our backyard, like how do we handle that? Do we ask them to go back into their houses because the smoke is going into into my backyard and the kids are there? I'm asking for somebody.
Call 911. I mean, honestly, it's a DPS matter. It's not a cannabis regulatory matter. It's a DPS matter, and again, with law enforcement being my background, I wouldn't want or advise you to go and confront them. They are going to be your neighbors even after that. So the best thing would be call DPS. Let them know.
Okay. Thank you for that response. And to those who are listening, you heard it from him. If you have a neighbor that's smoking and it's going into your yard where your kids are playing, please do not confront them. Call 911 instead.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Magofnia. And just for the record, also, Mr. Palacios, we received 2 written support letters for you from Ms. Teresita A. Santos and also from Mr. James Santos. Short recess, please. Thank you. We are back from our short recess, members. For the announcements, just a reminder, we have also a 1 o'clock hearing this afternoon for one of the zoning nominees. And if there's no objections from the members, that we will allow the council and our LA to prepare the standing committee report for this committee. And when it's completed with the additional statement from Mr. Palacios for inclusion into the standing committee report, that it will be circulated for our signatures. Are you recognized,
Madam
Representative
Chair,
Ato?
I
Go
don't
ahead.
have any objections with that, but can we make the proper motion that we proceed with the committee report in support of Mr. Palacios' nomination?
Yes, and you may offer the proper motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With that being said, I make a motion that we proceed with the committee report in support of Mr. Palacios' nomination to the Cannabis Commission to the full body of the delegation. So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Vijay Ato, and for the second. All those in favor say aye. Nays, the motion is carried. Okay, may I hear an adjournment for this meeting this morning? All those in favor say aye to adjourn the meeting. Nays. Thank you, members. I'll see you at 1 o'clock. This meeting's adjourned.